Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second week of our 2025 Directors Closeup Spirit Awards edition. I am Maria Raquel Bossi, Senior Director of Education and International Programs at Film Independent. Before we start, I want to take a moment to thank all the partners that make Film Independent's important work possible. Thank you to this year's supporters of the Directors Closeup, the Directors Guild of America, IMDb Pro, and SAGindie. And thank you to our 2025 Film Independent Spirit Award supporters, Premier Partner Lavazza, Principal Partner IMDb Pro, and official partners Bullet Frontier Whiskey, Fiji Water, and Mirabal. We so appreciate your support of the independent film community. Tonight, we welcome this year's John Cassavetes Award nominees who are here to tell us all the secrets on how they make every penny count to bring their brilliant stories from the script to the screen for less than 1 million. That's right, less than 1 million. And before, this category was less than 500,000. So these people really had double the money to make these wonderful films that we're celebrating today. Here with us are Vera Drew, of The People's Joker. Vera, how are you? Great to see
Hi,
you.
great to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. Love your lamp in the back.
Oh, thank you.
Morrisa Maltz, director of Jazzy. Morrisa.
Hello.
Welcome, Morrisa. Great to see you. Next up, we have Kelly O'Sullivan and Alex Thompson of Ghostlight. Welcome. Great to see you both. Next up, we have Shuchi Talati, director of Girls Will Be Girls. Last but not least, we have Corey Sherman, director of Big Boys. Hi, Corey.
Hello.
Thank you all for joining us today, and congratulations on these wonderful films. Our moderator today is the wonderful and Darrien Michele Gipson, who is the executive director of SAGindie and a great ally of Film Independent and of filmmakers all over. So Darrien, do you want to?
Hi there.
Your face, great to see you. And thanks again for doing this, and take it away. Enjoy the show. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Maria. So as Maria said, I'm Darrien Michele Gipson. I'm the executive director of SAGindie. And honestly, I couldn't be more pleased than to talk to this group of fantastic filmmakers. In the spirit of John Cassavetes, they all made exemplary films for $1 million or less. And it really speaks to the motto of SAGindie that if you write a compelling story, then even if you have a lower budget, the actors will come. They're really excited to do good work. So it really makes me happy to have seen all of these films that had such wonderful performances, such amazing direction, fantastic production design. I mean, it's a little annoying, but they are all fantastic. So let's just jump in. I want to talk a little bit about the process of getting actors onto your films. So many creatives believe that if they have a relatively smaller budget, that it's impossible to find good actors and even professional actors. And you all managed to do this so beautifully. So I want to start actually with Corey. Corey, I mean, you had this like beautiful challenge to find your Jamie. I mean, I love that your film is called Big Boys, and it's not actually about being big, but more about just finding your way through awkwardness and acceptance and just trying to feel like you belong. And it's such a beautiful and poignant and subtle kind of role that I'd really be interested in how you went about finding your lead, Jamie, as well as some of your other cast.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. It's very kind of you. Yeah, I mean, that was I knew the movie would sort of live or die based on the performances, and particularly the performance of the lead, because the movie is just totally focused on him and in his head. And I was just really excited by the idea of finding a young actor who could just like play into the more sort of like I guess like subtle sense of humor I wanted the movie to have, and all the sort of like little nuances of these very hopefully like kind of like very honest moments of being a teenager and being closeted and all those things. And I was just hoping for the best, and we worked with a great casting director named Christy Lugo, and we just put out a casting call around the country, and we just got very, very lucky that Isaac Krasner submitted a tape. I mean, he was the first tape that we watched, and it was immediately very clear that his acting was just so sophisticated. He had such a like deep understanding of this character, and had such a sort of like respect for the character, and also really understood the tone and sense of humor of the story. Like I feel like that's a big thing with acting, is just finding actors who understand the act, like the tone you want for your movie, because there's so many different styles of acting and so many senses of humor. And I just didn't have, there was so much I just didn't have to explain to him. And so there was a sense from watching him from the get-go of like, oh, he just totally inhabits this character and is so engaging to watch, that I have a feeling that he can totally carry this movie, which is a pretty low-key movie. It's people at a campsite, with like shifting character dynamics, and like a character who's slowly and gently realizing that he's gay. And so it's like you really need like a super engaging performance at the center of that. And I just knew Isaac could do it.
I do love that it didn't go big on those emotions. It didn't get it didn't balloon, but it was very contained about how he kind of moved through it. And what I was really impressed by is that in the movie, as he kind of imagines his older version of himself, he had such a realistic version of himself in the future. Like he wasn't suddenly a Ken doll, or he wasn't the worst version of himself that he could imagine. It was really like, that could be me. And it was hopeful, even if he wasn't completely without some awkwardness. His older version was just such a great projection of who we thought he could be, which I credit to you for understanding that it doesn't have to be, suddenly he's six-packed and
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the movie is called Big Boys for a reason. Like, I like the idea that the movie is partially him discovering that he's into bigger guys, and so he sees that that can be attractive too. So when he imagines himself in the future, he's still a big guy, and he's like wearing it with pride, and he's got his nice like cardigan on, and his nice like thick frame glasses, and it's like okay, he's sort of styled around it well now in sort of like a nice like collegiate kind of way, and so. Yeah, I mean, I thought it would be a fun way of like speaking to both like the way that the character sees himself and what he hopes for himself in the future, and also just the gift of meeting a guy who's confident in his body, and showing a young person that he can feel the same about his.
that there's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
He's just going to grow up, but there's nothing intrinsically wrong, and I love that. Um, Morrisa, I want to come to you because I feel like your casting must have been very different for Jazzy. So can you talk a little bit about specifically how you're looking for Jazzy and Soraya? Like that had to have been an interesting process.
Sure. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's kind of the exact opposite of Corey. So that was a good segue. Yeah, because then mine was kind of based in a way off of my relationship with Jazzy, and watching her grow up. She was in The Unknown Country, which I made before this, and we've all known her since she was 5, and we live now about half the year in South Dakota, and she became like my family. So just getting to watch her grow up, we all kind of had this sense that if she wanted to she just had such a great time making The Unknown Country that we were like, well, we want to like help her like continue to do this. So it was more born out of that. And then Jazzy kind of brought in the people that like Soraya was her friend, that her natural, like it was they had a natural friendship, and it's a fiction, but it was kind of based off of the girls and then the other kids that are in the film before we really knew if we could even make a film about Jazzy and Soraya. We did like a scene where we just shot at the school and told put an open call out for parents to bring their kids, and that's how the other kids were cast. It was like who was left and who kind of stood out, but we didn't really know we were doing an open call. We just like thought that we would have all the kids come, and then there were very clearly like kids that really stood out, which was really exciting because now they've grown, like one of the little kids like emails with Mark Duplass now all the time, like this little boy, and like and he just like showed up like one day for like, it's just like, it's so sweet. So they're just like all these kids who just in South Dakota like wouldn't have necessarily been on a casting call, like how Corey found his cast. So yeah, so I don't know if that makes sense, but just
No, it totally makes sense. And I mean, what a beautiful thing. I recently out of Sundance saw another film based out of South Dakota. So South Dakota's blowing up.
Oh yeah,
now.
East of Eden, right?
Yeah, East of Wall.
Or East of Wall, that's right. Sorry.
But and I love that
Yeah.
it really is using the people of the towns and of the land who really embody South Dakota. Like it's very distinctive, and I think it's a beautiful way that you showed young kids growing up and trying to make their way, but also behind the scenes, you're giving them an outlet, and I think that that's fantastic, and they did a great job.
And it's thank you so much. I appreciate that. I was also just gonna say really quickly, East of Wall, I know had a lot of the same South Dakota crew, and it's really nice that in these states and like smaller communities to like that are yearning to have films and make things and have sort of these creative outlets. It's great also to have people that are that are yearning to make movies able to make movies. So that's just something different. But
No, I think that's fantastic to talk about that, and I encourage you, this may not be specific for you, Morrisa, but I encourage you all to talk about like your casting directors and people who are out there working, and trying to help filmmakers in this area, because it can be so hard for filmmakers to understand and to know who everybody is. So if you had a great experience with anybody, let's throw them out there. Let's make sure that people know. I'm gonna go now to Vera, because your film just gloriously defies easy explanation. And even though you clearly had an in with the lead actress yourself, I'm very curious about how you went about explaining this fevered dream of a film to other actors so that they could see your vision.
Oh, well, I think like it kind of was like you either get it or don't scenario. I think once you like kind of describe something as like a queer coming of age parody of Todd Phillips' Joker, you either like run for the hills or like, sure, I'm doing nothing. It helps that it was pre-vax COVID, so everybody was very unemployed. And I mean, as far as like the casting goes, I really tried to, the guy who plays Penguin in the movie is Nathan Foston, who the part was written for him. It's, my movie's very autobiographical, and his and Joker's relationship in the movies just us. Like we didn't really we didn't have to do much exploration because we'd been working together for about 10 years. And I originally like tried to do that with most of the cast. David Liebehart's in it, and he's somebody who just like the most punk rock comedic performer of all time. And like I don't think anybody could have played Ra's al Ghul besides him. I think he's like the best portrayal of Ra's al Ghul in any Batman adjacent movie to date. So I'd say like in those two cases, it was like, okay, no brainer. Like these guys got to get in. And like, David in the movie is kind of playing this sort of like Obi-Wan Kenobi mentor figure. And he kind of always was that to me. Like he always, he's just full of like really crazy Hollywood stories and is very spiritual and is a UFO experiencer and stuff. So it was like a no-brainer kind of putting him in this like sort of sensei role. But I had a very challenging time casting young Joker originally, and we had we had an actor drop out at one point. We also I ran into some issues, I think, just like finding a parent who was like cool with their son playing a future trans woman of America, which was discouraging, but also could have had everything to do with the fact of, as you said, it's like a kind of indescribable movie. But I think like I don't even really remember how we found Griffin, who we ended up casting, but it was kind of that same thing that Corey was saying. It was just like when I saw him like reading the lines on like video, it was just like, oh, he's got this. Like I don't need to explain it to him because he was just devastating. It was like a devastating performance, but also really funny. It was just like, oh, this is it. Like this is the tragedy and comedy that I need to do this. And went through a very similar thing with casting Kane Disler in the movie, who plays Joker's boyfriend, but we ended up finding him through a casting website, and that was a big hurdle. Like finding a trans masculine actor was just hard at that point. Like I don't know if there's just not a lot of like casting services for trans actors out there. But finding one who was comfortable playing like a parody version of Jared Leto's Joker was an extra challenge as well. But it was just that same thing. Like the second I saw his read, I was like, this is obviously supposed to be the person. It was we really got blessed, I think, kind of at the last minute with those two.
Well, for better or for worse, I feel like watching that movie was like having a portal into your mind. It was so colorful and so kinetic and just such a wild ride, that I really thought it was just so much fun and audacious,
Thank you.
which is pretty amazing for somebody who is quiet and subtle like you.
Yeah, I'm not currently broadcasting from the Black Lodge at all. So yeah, very subtle woman.
Yep. Okay, so Shuchi, I'm so curious about your film. First of all, because you had such an amazing location of this school and these houses. First of all, where did you shoot?
It is shot in the Himalayan foothills. So it's the school is in this town called Mussoorie, which is weirdly known for boarding schools. Like it's almost like the cottage industry of that town. I think there's like 100 boarding schools. So there are all these like uniform shops where you can buy the uniform for any school. Yeah, but it's beautiful.
It looked like a stunning area and a stunning land. So, one, how did you go about finding the school? And then how did you go about finding your actors?
Okay, the school. Well, the school is I think I needed a couple of important things. So the first scene in the film is where the lead character becomes the head prefect. She's like anointed, this kind of like somebody who's like basically anointed narc, like has to tell on their fellow students to their teachers and discipline them. But she feels it's really a position of honor and power. So I wanted this scene to take place on a mountaintop, where she literally and figuratively feels like she's top of the world and she's the first girl to get this position. And then through the course of the film, you see how fragile this power is. So that location was very important. So we scouted lots of schools, and then it's often like this jigsaw puzzle of well, this school has Diwali vacation during our shoot dates, and that school has like a 5-day vacation. This one has a 2-day vacation. This school, the kids will actually participate because, it's a scene with like 150 or 160 kids, and we're a little indie. So it was putting those pieces together, and like one school finally fit. And to find our lead was hard. Corey, I felt so jealous when you were like, that was the first audition we saw. I was like, oh my God. Because we worked with an amazing casting director. His name is Dilip Shankar. He's kind of a veteran. He cast Meera Nair's Monsoon Wedding and the Indian casting for Life of Pi, all of these films. But he's also like a theater guy, so he's not in Bombay, which is like India's LA, Hollywood city, but he has his foot in both worlds. And he suggested we do a two-pronged approach. One is India has a big film industry, lots of young actors with credits, so we should audition them because, acting for camera is actually a very specific craft. And as you well know, and also do a open casting call. So, just he had scouts post notices in schools and colleges. And we saw so many actors, and a lot of them were good. Like they would hit the beats. I felt like they were sharp in doing the scene analysis and all of that. But there's something like there's a kind of aliveness that was missing, uh, a kind of unexpectedness. Because I feel like people are so unexpected. When you're angry, you might laugh, so that quality of just being in the moment, we were not seeing. And then Preeti Panigrahi, who plays the lead, I think she sent in her tape 5 months into the casting process while we were like really beginning to sweat it. Uh, and immediately, like such a standout, because one of the audition scenes was when she talks to her love interest for the first time, and this like meet cute talking under the stars. And a lot of the young women would just play it super coy. They would bat their eyelids and, they would just, and I'm like, this is how we're used to seeing young women on screen behave as they're falling in love. And that's where they're taking their cues from. And I would always, like, whoever I met in person for a callback, I would say, but you're the head prefect, And Preeti, as soon as she came into audition, she just really had this strength and this dignity where she liked this boy, but she was not going to debase herself. Like I didn't have to say that to her. She had it. And this kind of strength and this way of being. And I would say this third thing, which is a little harder to name, but the film is set in the late 90s. And I think there was a kind of unself-consciousness in our body language, which I think now when people are so used to their angles and looking at themselves, it just feels like people carry themselves differently. And she had this unself-consciousness. And immediately just so that was like the first step to spot her. And then second, the film has a fair amount of sexuality, which in India is a pretty conservative place with regards to sexuality, but teen sexuality in particular, very taboo. So there were, I think, a lot of actors who I knew were not even going to consider it. But Preeti is a little badass. I mean, we sent her the script before the callback. Not only did she read it, she made her sister, who's a lawyer, who's like a kind of human rights lawyer, read it. She made her mom read it, and then she talked about it with all of them and came to the callback so prepped that if she was offered the part, nothing was going to stand in her way. And often, like the young actors who came in for the callbacks, I would say, do you have any questions? And they were always concerned about the sexuality, understandably. But Preeti didn't ask about the sex scenes. And so I was like, hey, Preeti, do you have any questions about the sexuality and how we're going to handle it? And she was like, no, not really. I mean, it kind of made sense to me in the script. It seemed really important. And I'll say that it made me have conversations with my mom that I would have never had otherwise. And that makes me think that this film should get made.
Wow.
Wow.
I know.
I mean, what I hear so clearly though is that, when you're casting, and this is maybe something for all the actors out there, it really is just a bit of alchemy and magic dust. Like you go, you do your best, you be as real as you can, and when it's right, it'll show up. And if it wasn't right, it's not for you. So I think it's such an interesting thing that there were so many actors that were good, but
Yeah.
you found the one that was right. And there's a difference. Not being the one that's cast doesn't mean that you're not good. It just means that you weren't right for that. So I think that's a wonderful story. And she's so ballsy and so strong, and she's such a great actress.
Yeah,
So
she's stunning. And I just want to say the mom who plays the actress who plays her mom, Kani Kusruti, I mean, she was one of my favorite actors. Is one of my favorite actors in India. So she was on my list from the beginning. And as soon as she auditioned, I feel like I was obsessed. I think I watched her audition like over and over again. And she's actually also in All We Imagine as Light, which is nominated. And Kani herself is nominated for Best Supporting Performance.
not bad. It sounds like you have an eye for talent. Speaking of talent though, Kelly, all of this isn't new to you. I mean, you wrote and produced that indie darling St. Francis, as well as acted in it. You were also in Cha Cha Real Smooth. Now you've written and co-directed Ghostlight. I mean, first of all, are you just going to take over like this industry? Is that your plan? Should we just know that?
Industry, if you're out there, please call. I feel very lucky to have gotten to make the things that I've gotten to be involved in, because all of the things that you mentioned are so independent that it's just filmmakers, like even Cha Cha Real Smooth, Cooper Rafe, is like also making things. I know it's like pushing a boulder up a mountain, and that's what we do a lot when we make films. But yeah, no, it's not a lot of things would have to happen for the industry.
You're taking over.
Just own it. Just own it. It's all mine. Do you feel like you took away knowledge from being in the other films and having written it and watched them and produced them? Did you learn more about it so that you were ready to direct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have primarily been an actor for most of my career. And so I've really learned about filmmaking through that lens for a really long time. And so then when I started writing, I was like, well, I want to make sure that the characters I write, actors will be excited to play, that they're not just trying to sell terrible dialogue, that they'll be excited to go in and work. And then as a director, I think it really helps with the act of translation with actors, because I've been in a situation where I've been directed by people who aren't good at talking with actors and who treat them sort of like puppets, and will give line readings and say like, oh, that's not how I imagined it, can you do it like this? And I really value collaboration. I don't know if we're in
There's
and there's a tropical
There's
storm
literally
going
just
on. I don't know if
started.
you can hear it.
We can't hear it at all. You
good.
sound great.
Oh, amazing. Okay, well, hopefully we don't get blown away. But I do feel like having that understanding from all of those different points of view really helps me be able to navigate back and forth between those roles, and it feeds into each other. I hear about people who've worked, that they were in makeup department, and then they were in props, and then they were in camera department, and then they became a director. And I always really respect that route, because I think the more you understand the whole, then the easier it is in general.
And you learned something from observing and then doing.
Yeah.
There's just so much that you can read about before you have to just kind of try some things out. So I think it's really great. Here's the $1 million or less question is
Less.
less. We're just gonna do you write to the $1 million or under $1 million, or do you write the story and see where the budget takes you? Let's start with Alex, or Kelly, since
Well, I don't write with budget in mind at all. And then Alex is always the producer of our films and I make him figure it out.
Yeah. It's literally like, I mean, on St. Francis, that's what's really fun about not having. So far we haven't made a film where we had like somebody sort of telling us what to do in a way, and that's felt really lucky. Not that we wouldn't welcome the support, but it's funny because then you get a script that has like St. Francis had 137 scenes and like 27 characters and 16 locations, and that was $100,000. And it's like it's really fun to have done that through totally ignorant, and then to come out on the other side and be like, oh, I guess we can do that. So then on the next one, you don't come with that fear, but it does make things challenging. So yeah, Ghostlight was not written with a budget in mind, but it did get made for a budget.
And you would welcome support from anybody who may want to support from here on in?
Absolutely.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if Kelly takes over the industry, I'd be happy to work with her.
I always have the caveat though of like, but don't give us too many notes. I don't want money.
More money, less
Oh.
notes.
Yeah,
exactly.
sure, in a
hear-
perfect world.
I do think in the conversation of casting, though, it's like you end up hearing from a lot of people that there's like a list of actors, and you hear the word value a lot. But then I think what everybody's films on this call, I've seen most of them, but you watch these films and they feel so self-evident in their value. And that value doesn't come from a name, especially. And I think that's just true. Like I think it's false that these names inherently bring value. And so I think it is really important to remember that like it's great actors and great stories and great filmmakers who get you to the next level. It's not like, some individual who's sort of independent of your process.
Yeah, I think that you can't apply external value to internal stories. Like we've all seen stories where we don't know any of the characters until we watch the movie and then they're completely memorable. And we've all seen people whose faces we know well in things that we don't necessarily, that doesn't resonate. So
Yeah.
it can't be as simple as a face and a name. It really does have to be performance and environment and story. I'm very curious though, Vera, how did you know, or did you know, that you could make this movie at a cost with the kind of vibrancy and the different kind of medium in it? And like it really goes everywhere. How did you contain this kind of explosion of filmmaking?
I think I was really naive. I really like the script that I wrote with my co-writer Brie LaRose. Like we kind of we didn't really put any restrictions on ourselves as far as like the scope of it. Like we knew like it would kind of be maybe not particularly like structured like a comic book movie, but we gave ourselves the like permission to go full blown comic book movie with like set pieces and stuff. And I think when we wrote it, I had no idea like how we were gonna like pull off like a bat cave or anything. Like I don't recommend this to any people watching this for practical advice. Like at no point did I really map out a budget for the movie. It really was like, we crowdfunded a little bit. I financed the rest to finish it and stuff. And but I think like kind of writing this film that was like, I think impossible. The goal was to write something that was sort of impossible for a first time director to really pull off. It kind of opened up the door to like get really creative with the aesthetic. Like I knew I wanted it to be a mixed media movie. I had this incredibly unique opportunity of just like this community of artists that I had kind of built around the movie. I put out like a video and like a website that was basically like, hey, I'm making a trans Joker movie, and if you want to help, like sign here. And I kind of was expecting maybe like 12 or so people to reply, but it ended up being a lot of different artists from very different mediums, most of which didn't really have aspirations of like working in film per se. But I think that was like really exciting to me because it was like, I couldn't think of any other first time director that had that kind of opportunity to like build a crew, like a network of a crew, like spread out all over the globe like that. And just the sheer amount of people. But I knew it would look like no other movie that had ever been made. So yeah, necessity kind of really was like the mother of invention, and it was I think it was like specific to the project itself, but the movie kind of told me what it is as we were piecing it all together. And I don't know, I think kind of similar to just like how everybody's talking about like the casting process, or like how you mentioned like the specific alchemy. Like I think in film school and in general, like how film theory is like talked about, it's talked about with this very like auteur mindset, and I really tried to just throw that out the window immediately and let people lean into their passion and their like aesthetic, and I'd fill in the gaps. I'd explain what my vision was, but let people, you know, if they were making like PlayStation, like like late 90s style graphics for, you know, that was their aesthetic. Okay, that's what our Batcave or Batmobile is going to be, or, you know, like psychedelic paintings. Okay, we'll turn that into like our theme park set into that. So it was really cool, and I think it kind of contributed to just the film sort of textually feeling very queer and diverse. Like I think that was very important to me.
It definitely had a feel of artistic freedom to just like go out and try something, and there are no, you know, there's no place in there where you go, oh well, that doesn't belong, because everything is there. So there's a freedom to knowing that you can't go terribly wrong if you're just being creative and colorful and interesting, and you know, there's a place for you.
Yeah, it was always a the mission was to be as sincere as possible. And it's funny because I recently rewatched the Muppet movie, and I realized how much I like think I was just, it's a very different film than The People's Joker, but that's sort of like we're putting on a show and we're a big chosen family of like colorful puppets. Like I think that was kind of the spirit of it all the way.
I can totally see it. I like that a few of you have mentioned the fact that you have a community, that you are using actors again or places again, people again. So can you talk a little bit about what it takes? And I think I'm going to start with you, Morrisa. Uh, just when you realize that this is somebody that you want to hold close. Like we talk a lot about people always kind of look up when they're looking for, you know, who they want to associate with, who they want to like meet, etc. And we always say it's not just who's up, it's who's to your left and to your right, who is really, you're going to be your great collaborators. And so what is it about your collaborators that helped you to know that that they're your people?
Sure. And I think that, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind in answering that question is just also when you're making these films at these budgets, like, I mean, both The Unknown Country and Jazzy were under 300K. And, you're going through a lot with the people that you're making these films with. And if you're all down to do this together, you're going through an experience that makes you incredibly close. Because you really have to have a level of, I honestly don't know what the right word is, but sort of this like belief uh in like the beauty of making art and the power of it that's kind of not real, but just like the beauty of what it could be. You have to have that. You have to have, you know, this crazy will that is confusing and chaotic. And you just have to have these things to get through these really tiny, making these projects in these tiny budgets. And so, you know, if there's like 6 or 7 people left at the end of the day, which is what these films are, including the cast, you are stuck together. You know, you've really become a family. And so I think for us, you know, the crew and the cast of both films, really, we just all became so incredibly close. And you know, and that's really important to me. It's really important to me in making these projects that it's not just about making a film, but the process of that and what you're building along the way. So yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
It totally does. It sounds a bit like, you know, everybody becomes battle tested,
Yeah.
and when you're in the trenches of filmmaking.
Yeah, and it feels so
And,
silly because you don't want to be like, oh my God, it was so hard. It's like fighting a war. Like it's not. But in our little worlds of making these things, like it feels like that in those, you know, in the process.
But the pressure and the stress either will bring out the best in you or the worst in you, and you find who will either match your crazy or derail your train of thought. And it's important to kind of figure out who's gonna I'm gonna just mix every metaphor I can in here. Who's rowing the same way? I don't know what else I can throw in there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day of shooting in like negative 20 degrees with like, you know, 5 people and no food, you know, you're like, well, who's left here? And like, and who was like, I can't do this, which should be most people because it's crazy. But like, you know, and I think that really, but you know, at the end of the day, it's also like we're so lucky to really be able to be making things and doing this, that I think it's also that kind of value of realizing how uh, what's the right way to say it, but like that we're really getting to make things, and that like it's not, we shouldn't be taking it that seriously, but also taking it really seriously at the same time. It's like that balance, if that makes sense.
No, it's an incredible tightrope to walk, to know that it's serious enough that this is somebody's livelihood and their passion, and not to take the process seriously, but maybe not yourself so seriously. And it's so easy to fall on one side or the other of that, and to go wrong, that when you find people who stay true, you know, it can be invaluable. And I know, you know, so many of you, I know, Kelly and Alex, you guys have worked a few times with a few different people. And when you find them, how do you create an atmosphere where you can keep them kind of in your back pocket, if you will, without it feeling like you're all ask and no give? Does that make sense? Like, you don't want to keep coming to somebody and saying, will you work? Will you work? How do you balance that out for them so that you are also giving?
We do pay them,
That's a
according
great
to
start.
SAG, according to the SAG agreement that we're under, whatever agreement that is. And that's a big part of it, you know. And we do it on time and we make sure they're fed, but I know it's a lot more than that.
We like to make sure the people feel valued. So in addition to those really basic, like good working conditions, we ask people what they think about the script. You know, all of the actors that we work with, collaboration is really thrown around as this like buzzword, but we mean it. Like every actor who we meet with, we're like, where are there hiccups in the script? What do we, what are you thinking about that is not there that you wish were there? Or what do you feel like you don't need? Which is not to say I give them carte blanche as the screenwriter. I'm not saying like, yeah, take the script, do whatever you want, but we want to have these conversations early on to make sure that everybody knows, like you were saying, Vera, it's not an auteur, it's not just us, it's everybody is making this soup. And so I think if people feel really invested and valued, then they're going to have ownership over it in a way that hopefully the next time, that we say, hey, I've got this script, they're like, great, I want to do that again. Because like you were saying, Morrisa, it's so hard. It is so hard. And the pay is there, but it's not nearly what people are worth. And so it's trying to treat people like the incredible human beings that they are.
Totally.
Something we also do a lot, which is really similar to like the community you're drawing from, Vera, is we almost, with the exception of a few roles, it's all offers.
Yeah.
So we are really lucky. We're sort of enmeshed in the Chicago theater community. And so, I mean, it's just like one of the best cities for actors. I mean, I would say, the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you just know everybody, you just really know everybody. And you're like, oh, Dexter could totally, absolutely kill that.
Or I like wrote the lead in Ghostlight with Keith in mind because he and I had done a play together. And so it's sort of like, we're lucky that we get to play in this, and let's keep the metaphors going, this incredible sandbox that we have.
Yeah.
I just
And
want to
so
note that you added sandbox and soup to our metaphor.
Oh.
A soupy sandbox.
We're gonna go
Delicious.
through them all. I want to come to Corey and Shuchi. Corey first. I don't know, of course, exactly how old your actors were, but certainly they were playing youthful people. What was your specific kind of North Star in treating them both young and as the lead? Like how did you kind of bring them through being the lead of this and yet being a kind of a younger actor?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it did come down to like been talking about, just sort of like empowering them with like a sense of like, well, this character belongs to you now, you're the department head of this character, so I want you to tell me what feels like natural or right to you. Like if you want to rewrite this bit or if you want to like improvise, like please go ahead, because what matters most to me is that this feels as realistic as possible. Like these are kids you really could know from reality, as opposed to like concoctions of like a 20-year-old like writing in a final draft document. Like I just really, and I've been so inspired by shows like Freaks and Geeks and like Pen 15 and like movies like Eighth Grade and like stuff like that, where it's like this is what real kids actually sound like. Like I find that so exciting. I mean, in general with like characters, but particularly with kids, because I feel like kids can get done so dirty by screenwriters and just turn them into these absolute caricatures, and it's just like it just feels like so false and jarring. And I think like making things like fun for them, like I think like luckily they really just bonded with one another. And I think we had sort of like a summer camp atmosphere, like shooting this movie on the mountain and all sort of like living near each other, and this feeling of like we're making this big project together. And I think that giving them room to just get to know each other. I mean, luckily they were all just like wonderful people, and so they got along and really supported each other. And I tried to just provide like the guardrails of like, well, this is the tone of the movie, or like this is what the audience needs to understand from the scene. But like no matter what you do, you're being this character perfectly, because that's why we cast you. It's like you already know how to be this person.
That's fantastic. How hard was it to schlep things up that that mountain?
It was hard at times. Yeah. There were some tall hills, and yeah, I mean, I will always hold a special place in my heart for the crew that was doing that in the heat of the summer. So
I mean, just so you know, South Dakota has a lot of flat land in it.
yeah, that's a good point. I gotta
Just gonna throw it out there. Shuchi, you definitely had like to corral some youthful people.
Yes.
how did you maintain, and before you answer that, I want to let everybody know that in just about 5-6 minutes, we're going to start going to some of your questions. So if you have them, please put them in there. But please, Shuchi.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I didn't treat them very differently than other actors, but in some ways, of course, so they were both, the two young leads were, I think 21 and 22, playing younger. And so for me, there were a couple things. I wanted to create this sense of play and safety. And by play, like I like to do a lot of takes and I want to do a lot of variations. So change an intention to be, okay, here you are flirting with her, here condescend to her, here, punish her. And so, which really changes the intent of the scene. Or sometimes when I'm on her close up, I'll whisper to him to say something totally unexpected. So, but I start this in the audition process. I'll say that we're going to do this several times. We're going to try things. We're going to play. There's no one right way to do this scene. So if I'm doing another take, if I'm doing a third take or a fourth take, I don't want you to feel like you're doing something wrong. We're discovering all the layers of this scene because it has many. And we're going to find them together. So I think that sense that we're going to play. And on set, if I'm doing another take, you do not want to feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing what the director wants. Is something that I want to instill early. And then for both the young actors, they went in for a few days of acting lessons with our casting director, who's also an acting coach. And not so much working on the script, but just like expanding their actor toolbox. And then I came in on the very last day to now try to apply those tools to the characters and see. So also develop a language so that they would feel comfortable that we had a way of working. And then slightly specific to the scenes that had intimacy and sexuality, when we were rehearsing, and I should say here that we didn't have the opportunity to work with an intimacy coordinator because India has very few, and the very few are very expensive and not accessible to our budget range. So, to also develop a language there, how are we going to work, to say that, touch it's a physical thing. So you may feel something and you may not feel something because it's also artificial. You're doing it in this, a contrived setting, and they're both okay. And just like allow it. Also to give them freedom to say no, this is not comfortable. Like really to pause at many moments and on set, try to build a lot of time around these scenes, almost like you're shooting a scene, like you do for a stunt scene. It's just going to take time because mostly I'm very strict about actors never seeing monitor, except for the intimate scenes when we would frame up, to be like, here's how you're appearing. Are you okay with this? And I think there were a couple of times actually the actors requested changes, which made me feel really good that they felt safe enough to be like, actually, I don't want that. Could you change the angle there? And so to allow them to speak up. But yeah, I think I feel like the three were very generous with each other too, the three leads. And I think that really helps. Kani Kusruti, who's like the more experienced actor, and she's amazing and she's so present that I feel like she helped the young actor. She modeled how to be.
I mean, I think it's fantastic and it's empowering them and setting them forward as actors to know that they should feel empowered and confident.
Yeah.
And it's great that you let them know that doing another take does not reflect upon your performance. It just this is the time we get to do that. So I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. So I have a couple of questions that is just for everybody. So I usually like to call people's names, but I'm going to see if you guys want to volunteer. Having made these last films for well under $1 million, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started? I know Morrisa looks like, please don't call on me, please.
No, I sorry. I was just thinking if I knew, I think someone was saying this earlier. I think Vera was saying it that like if I would have known the things, then I'm glad I didn't know a lot of the stuff. Because I think actually as I learn more and know the boundaries and know all of what I'm supposed to be doing, it actually shrinks more of or I don't know how to exactly describe that, but it's just that like I'm glad that I didn't that I I don't know if that made sense.
It
but,
seems like if you know
like,
too much, you can start self-editing you. You can start pulling back because you're afraid. So there's
and you can apologize a lot when you don't know, like, and it's real. You know, you don't have to fake it. Like you can just there's a lot of room when you don't know. Whereas like once you start to actually like know all the things that you're doing incorrectly and that you can't do, you know, like all the then it's harder to really you know, kind of. But I don't. But making these films is so difficult. It's like you don't want to keep doing it like this anyway. Yeah,
I mean, you also learn along the way what you don't want to repeat, which is also a beautiful answer. And I would love for somebody else to chime in on either what you wish you knew, or if you had, let's say, $150,000 more, would it have significantly changed the film that you actually made?
Were you gonna say yes?
Well, time.
Oh, time.
We're
Yeah.
gonna say days and food aside,
Yeah.
because everybody would love more days and everybody would love more greater food.
There's a scene in Ghostlight that is really, I think, pretty effective, but it's like an emotional high point in the film, and we should have had we shot it in 15 minutes. It's
What
like
scene?
eight shots. It's the big blow up scene outside the house where he's like, "Get the fuck out."
She's like making the little garden, and she only had one chance at her coverage because also we were working with a minor, and her time was up, and we were like,
We literally were like, "Go again. Okay, let's do go again. Okay."
I love that scene though. That's it. You feel the raw. It's like what you were saying, like feeling the raw emotion, and you feel that so much from that.
Yeah.
That's
I think it would have affected the outcome of the movie, really, or significantly. The movie wouldn't have been different.
No, I think the first thing to go is like any sort of like director fee that goes really fast.
Oh,
So like maybe we would be, you know.
Yeah, we would all be less broke.
Yeah, that would probably
that's like the at the Tribeca Q&A, someone asked Jazzy, they were like, so what's like the best part of like the film being done, or like what do you like? And she was like, I'm just so happy to not see Morrisa stressed anymore. It was so hard seeing her so stressed for so many years, and now we can like go get ice cream again, and she's like fun. Like she just was like, it's so I feel like just the stress of like more money would have just helped like the core people that are making the movie probably feel less stressed while you're making the film. Maybe that's I think where 150 would have helped, was just the not being worried all the time that everybody's okay and doing, and you know, all that stuff.
Well, I think like we all landed the plane, but like there are probably independent filmmakers who are like still in post or like picking up days, or you know, going sort of like who are in a more unconventional process and like haven't made it, who are like, I really would love that like cushion, or that like to manage risk a little bit, I guess.
I mean, I don't know anybody who would, think, no, please, no more money on this production. That would be quite amazing. But I think it's really interesting that the things that it would apply to are not story or in front of camera per se. And I'm sure that there are people who, if they had a little bit more money, they could get, that one shot that they just couldn't afford, etc. But also in those moments, it forces a certain amount of creativity that while you might have wanted the car crash, if you can't afford it and you find a way to, create the moment, from that point on, you can create the moment. There's value in it. So I love that, at its core, we still have these beautiful movies. you all could probably eat better and pay rent, and if that's important to you, that's fine. That's fine. If you want food.
I think also that not sometimes like we had at the end of Jazzy, we had a different ending. We like had that her rabbit was gonna die. Which would have been a terrible ending. It would have been such a bummer. And we didn't have time to shoot it. We didn't have an extra day. That's like in what you guys were just saying, like not like we didn't have that extra time. And in that situation, that actually helped us, where like it forced us to be like, how can we end the movie? And we made a decision that didn't without that extra time. So I think also sometimes just not having that stuff in these types of films helps you to make forces creative decisions.
Yeah, it forces you to, I agree, be really rigorous when you are like, okay, what scenes can I afford to lose? And possibly you might have lost some of those in the edit. So sometimes it forces that rigor. And second, I was just thinking when you're asking this question that it's so hard to answer now because these decisions were made like our cinematographer and I, as we were designing the visual language of the film. The visual language of the film is like not built in the air. It's built on the amount of money we might have, the amount of time we have, how we want to work on set. Like for me, that's always like maximize time with the actors. So that means that she will light a certain way, she will work a certain way. And so there all these decisions are designed, in the beginning, I also don't think about the script, but at some point, everything is designed around the budget that we have, the resources that we have, and how we're going to maximize and beg, borrow, steal, all of these things that they all shape the film. So in the end, it's so hard to be like, I don't even know what film I would make if there was a lot more money. Like so much thought went into making this version.
Yeah,
I mean, oh, please.
I was just gonna say, I think I'm always sort of confounded when I hear executives talk about like, oh, this is a $7 million film, or it's a $15 million film, or it's a $40 million. And I'm
Yeah.
like, if Ghostlight was $7 million, it never would have been made. Like what like where does it? It's all very arbitrary, I think, honestly. And like when we see films that fail, I think they fail because they're not personal, they're not unified, they don't have the rigor that you're talking about. And when they succeed, it's because they make like they make the right choices 1,000 times. Like The People's Joker is like 100,000 choices made correctly. I guess all of our films are like that. It's like, but I just love that, Vera, with your film, you really do see the seams intentionally, and the cohesion of it is like this miracle. And it's like a metaphor. I mean, that's how all films are, but it's like I think it's particularly cool to see that tapestry out in the open. But yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
All films should be under $1 million. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like having the experience of making The People's Joker might have, like, I will never be able to get that note of this script cost this amount of money. And I've gotten it, in some other stuff I've been trying to get going. And it's like, if you read the script for The People's Joker, which is like, I mean, $150,000, like that would have been like almost like 5 times our budget. Like it really like if you read it as a script, you'd be like, this is like a comic book movie level budget. Like how do you actually like put a dollar amount on these things? It just seems like one of the many kind of barriers that people at the top sort of just put up there, that is why so many movies don't get made in the first place.
Yeah, and it's kind of an arbitrary number assigned to your film that you then have to bear the burden of. So, somebody says, well, either you should make it for 7 million, or it's almost just as hard to say, we're going to buy it for 7 million, because it's still a burden that falls on the filmmaker on how does it succeed, and how do you get it out there correctly with now a $7 million price tag on it, you know, does it live up to an expectation that you didn't put on it is maybe the issue. So I'm going to go to some questions, and we're going to start off with Jonathan Schwartz, who has a question for Vera. That is, are there any films that influenced you and inspired you to make the film? I thought that it was an original, unique vision.
Thank you. I mean, Joel Schumacher is one of my favorite directors of all time. I love his Batman movies. I like seeing Batman Forever was I was like 6 years old seeing it in the theater, and it was like a bomb went off in my head or something. Like, not just in terms of like the kind of art I want to make, but I think just, I mean, those movies are just very, his Batman movies are just gay, expensive art films as far as I'm concerned. Like they're just big, beautiful neon nightmares. So that's a big one. I also, I kind of tried to tackle the material like it was sort of like a one-woman show. I'm very inspired by John Cameron Mitchell and Hedwig and the Angry Inch. That was another movie, I think, not necessarily a movie about a transgender person, but it's somebody whose gender kind of gets transed against their will and is just this beautiful like personal piece of art that is also like about the Berlin Wall coming down and glam rock and stuff. It just, I think that was another one that really I was thinking about a lot during it. And the one that like people I think are usually kind of surprised about, but Natural Born Killers was another one. Very thematically and tonally different than The People's Joker, but just the sheer amount of aesthetics, like the fact that every single frame it like changes film stock, and then 1 second we're like looking at this like anime Woody Harrelson, and then we're like hearing like a pop song, and then Rodney Dangerfield's like the most disgusting human you've ever seen. Like it really that whole like tonal and aesthetic mishmash I think was like kind of the thing that I could point to as we were going along, that like I could go like, okay, this is like gonna work, just because we were blending a lot of different styles, and just the fact that like 1 second you'd be watching a scene that was like funny and crass, and then the next it would be like, oh no, I'm like thinking about my mom and like how I hated growing up in the Midwest. Like it really we kind of needed that as our sort of Rosetta Stone of how to juggle all those tones, I think.
You say them, but I can see them all in your film. I can see the influences of them all so clearly. So it's amazing. And if I may, I'm going to throw in that Joel Schumacher, who's also just a love of mine, did something for us many years ago. And he in the 70s wrote the movies Car Wash and Sparkle. And when I said, oh my God, I love you and I love your films, but Car Wash and Sparkle, and he just looked at me and smiled and he said, yeah, Black people love me for that. And I was like, yep, you're the man. You get invited to the barbecue.
Oh.
It was lovely. Shuchi, did you want to add anything in there?
No.
Okay, then I'm going to go to another question by my good friend iPhone 308, who asked a question but doesn't tell me who it's for. So it's a free-for-all. Do you have a production code of ethics? What principles or ideals of yours informs the types of stories you tell and the way you tell them narratively, create them practically, and share them communally?
That's a strong question from iPhone 3.
iPhone 308 comes with it every time.
I think that I like to think about with like, I guess like a code of ethics. I guess the closest thing I could think of to that is sort of like that the writing is always open-ended, that like just because we have a script going doesn't mean that it's like done. If somebody has a good idea on set, or if one of the actors wants to improvise, like it's always open, especially in editing as well. Like just being like best idea wins. Like I'm not precious about any of this. This is sort of like a roadmap, but like I always want every scene to feel as strong and like alive as possible. And nothing's worse than just like shooting something you know is sort of stale and not working, that you like, thought was going to work, but like when you're there on the day, you're just like, this isn't it. And just like, even if it's like you have 5 minutes, just like try something new to just breathe some life into it.
I mean, it's all about the unexpected, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes it human. Is I think maybe Shuchi, you said you don't always know the reactions. You don't always know how people will do certain things. So it
Yeah.
makes it so exciting to watch when they come up with something you didn't necessarily think about.
Yeah. What a good question. I mean, I'll just add, I guess, to the production code of ethics. I mean, it's so hard. I think the real struggle when making films at a lower budget is that you want to treat people well and pay people. It's like, yes, we're all doing this together and we're making art, but people also have to pay bills. You know, people have like, they have things that they need to do to survive. And so this balance between, I always find that challenging, between being like, I'm not able to pay you what I think you should get, what you deserve. And yet I can't wait for the perfect conditions because then I will not be able to make my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that our work deserves to exist in the world. So you have this tension. And in to navigate that tension, I feel like, I mean, I always use transparency, really, like I'm often like very clear about how much money we have, how we're allocating it. Do you have thoughts about, you know, with department heads, if you want to allocate it differently, like we can talk about it and we can do that. So like what you were saying, Alex and Kelly, you know, what we can't do often with money. And we know that people are not just driven by money. As long as you can pay a certain minimum, I know many of us are driven by other things. Even though capitalism would lead us to believe otherwise, people are motivated by, you know, meaning and relationships and all of these things. And so you try to weigh it so that some of these other things can make up for what we cannot do in cold hard cash.
We have a question from Kenneth that kind of speaks to what you were talking about, but maybe you want to elaborate. And it's just, has there ever been a point in your career where you've been discouraged? And how did you push through?
Every day.
All the time.
Yeah. You've got to trick yourself into thinking it's just part of the creative process, I think. Like I think it's just part of it. And it's like, if you let it get in the way too much, you don't enjoy the process. And to me, it's like the main reason we do this is it's kind of supposed to be fun, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I
Well,
was
I also go back to this thing that, sorry,
you-
I'll keep it brief, but this producer who was a mentor figure at some point, he produced Stand By Me. His name is Steve Nicolaitis. And he said, like, when I was in film school, he was like, I just want you to know that, like, the people who make it are not the most talented, but they're the people who just stick around and are resilient. And every time I'm like so bummed because like we face rejection all the time. That is the norm. That I'm like, Steve said, the people who make it are resilient. So, you know, you just have to show up.
I mean, so much of all of this is just showing up and doing your best.
I always just tell myself I can quit if I want. I'm like, maybe there's a different career out there for me if I really hate it. And then just having the out of it, I'm like, oh, but I don't want to quit yet.
I think it's actually helpful to like not have these like to stay really focused on the project at hand and what you're trying to accomplish that day, that project, versus like what's next and what's like, because that also just helps you stay in the moment of what you're doing. And you can forget the discouragement of yesterday, which is always, you know, like it's a lot of blacking out what happened yesterday and then just focusing on today. And I feel like, yeah, not thinking too much about tomorrow or yesterday and just in the moment of your project helps.
I'm gonna throw a new metaphor out. Be a goldfish.
Pretty
Just
much.
forget about it. If it's something happens and it doesn't work, be a goldfish. Let it go. Start again and keep persevering. We only have maybe time for one, maybe two more questions. Jonathan Schwartz has another one for specifically for Kelly and Alex, which I think you alluded to a little bit, but did you have a theatrical background which inspired you to make the film? How have you marketed the film to audiences?
Yeah, we both have a theatrical background. I grew up doing like community theater in Arkansas, and I love theater so much. And so I really based Ghostlight off of my love of specifically community theater. Chicago theater has this incredible professional scene, but my heart is still with like, I always talk about how Ghostlight is like Manchester by the Sea meets Waiting for Guffman. And
Mhm.
like, I love the Waiting for Guffman mentality of like, we'll pick out our own costumes and we'll do each other's makeup. And so, yeah, that theatrical sort of tradition, I come from that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what independent film feels like. Like those actors really did pick out all their own costumes, and it was very much that. But and I think we have very little to do with how we market the film to
Yeah.
audiences. Yeah.
Our distribution company.
If you didn't
does it.
see the quote "Waiting for Guffman meets Manchester," then we had nothing to do with it.
That's my pitch, and they said no, thank you.
I mean, ultimately, you are now at the whim of somebody else's great taglines.
And they did a great job.
They did an
They did a
awesome
great
job.
job.
Yeah,
They did
we
a
like
great job. Yeah, yeah.
for real. We're not just
For real,
saying that.
for real, for real. Very nice. Very
Um,
talented.
There was a question about distribution, which I wasn't sure that, one, it can be kind of a big and long ordeal. And also, it's just hard. But what I do want to ask you about it is, did you find a, that there was an appetite for people to come and see your film who are open to the possibilities? Like, you've been in festivals, you've shown it to audiences. Were you able to, did you feel the love from the industry that we're taking a good look at you?
I think the industry might be different from like the human beings that are coming to watch
Yeah.
the films. They're like two different
Definitely.
things. Because the human beings like want to like what Alex was saying before, and Corey too. Like people want to feel emotions. Like they're not just looking for the A list actors. Like they really want to feel things. And so I feel like I don't want to take up all the space. But yeah, that's what I'll say for that.
Yeah, people have definitely shown up. I mean, it's been amazing to see it. I guess like most of my experiences have just come from being at film festivals and seeing like with my movie in particular, there is like this hunger for just like queer coming of age stories that like ring true for people, and like movies about like chubby people that don't make them just like complete jokes, like things like that. And it's been nice. I mean, it's sort of hard to tell. It's like once the movie's online, it's just sort of living its life. The only way I can really track it is through Letterboxd, and that's got its pros and cons. Like that is definitely a deal with the devil if you spend too much time on your movie's Letterboxd. But yeah, it is really encouraging to see that there is like a whole world of people of all ages who are like excited about indie movies and like spread the word with each other.
Yeah, I feel like you just have to get to the right people. Our film had a baby theatrical release, and when it released in New York, like we didn't really have money to hire PR, we didn't have money to do like P&A spends, all of these things. So I got together a group of 25 people on the advice of a friend who's an organizer. I was like, how do you do turnout? You organizers know about turnout. And he was like, what you need is a committee. And so, kind of very shyly in the beginning, I asked friends if they would be part of my opening weekend committee. And they were so excited and generous that initially I thought I would ask 5 people, and we ended up with a group of 20 who did all kinds of things. Like they made list of South Asian student organizations in the tri-state area with like emails so that we could email them and invite them, and connected me to podcasts, and like invited their influencer friends, and just did and took different screenings on opening weekend to be like, I'm going to bring my friends to this one. I'm going to bring my friends to the 3 p.m. because, everyone will come to the Q&A screening. and sold out, I think, like 7 shows on opening weekend. And we focused everything on opening weekend. And I think the word of mouth buzz continued. Our film ran for 6 weeks in New York, which I think Film Forum was like, this is crazy for like a film that has no money. And they were actually very sweet. They sent me they said a modest honorarium for all the work that we did. So they sent me $250, which I used to have a party for our opening weekend committee.
Oh, that's
Nice.
Right.
Awesome.
Well, our time together is coming to a close, but I hope that you all take this nomination as a sign of, one, that you're doing incredible work, and two, that you are now kind of the beacons to other people about what can be done when you have a beautiful story to tell, even if you don't have a large budget to tell it with. And then I think that people are going to be, those who haven't seen them yet, I encourage you to go and see every single one. They are beautiful. But I think probably a lot of people have watched them, and I'm sure they all agree that they're dynamic, they're interesting, they're great performances, and you don't see the lack of money on the screen. And I think that's the biggest compliment I can give you, is that it looks lush. They all look amazing. They all are complete and beautiful stories. And I congratulate you all for making such wonderful work.
Thank you, and
Thank you
congratulations,
all.
everyone.
Yeah, congratulations.
congrats,
and nice to meet
everyone.
all of you.
Nice to meet
Bye.
everyone.